Well, you've already heard quite a lot so far. It's been, if you're visiting and I'm a new face, welcome. My name is Jonathan Douglas. I'm one of the elders here. It's been great to hear to have Jason and Gretchen and the family over. It's been really good to hear what's happening up there. I always joke with Jason that he's adapted into Scottish life and culture so well. I don't want to be up in front. I think the only time I've ever seen Scots wanting to be up in front is for, I guess, drinking, playing the bagpipes, and fighting the English. Of course, we wouldn't condone any of those, apart from playing the bagpipes. Well, let me pray for our time, and then we're going to turn to chapter 15 of the book of Numbers, and we'll get to the sermon. Lord, I pray as we meet and gather from all over the place, in all different stages of life, and facing all sorts of challenges, encouraging times, discouraging times. Needs are abounding, Lord, but you are the great provider. As we come to your word, you also have provided us insight into who you are and what you're doing, and I pray that you would, through your Spirit, do what no preacher can, which is touch and point out needs, Lord, and your provision for those specific ones. And I pray, Lord, that you would be very close and very clear to each person gathered, Lord, and may the word do what you send it to do. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we take you back to CT's very helpful overview or introduction. We're following this nation of Israel, the people of Jacob. And through the way, as they've got up to the edge of the promised land, they've decided no, they're not going to follow God, they're not going to go in. And last week we had the consequences of that as God said, fine, you're not going to go in. And you're going to end up just walking around the desert, the wilderness, around Kadesh Barnea until you all die. And then I will take your children into this land and I will continue my plans with them. And certainly along the way there's been very many helpful lessons at the individual level. We're seeing what really mankind do with choices when they don't have the power of God through His Spirit to direct them. Certainly that was something that came home to me over the last couple of weeks as I met with my life group. We talked about this text and just seeing, wow, that's where I would be. I would be making choices like them with those kind of motivating factors unless God continues to help me. And that was something I'm going to take away from this, and just as it helps me in how I approach, understand who I am and what God's doing. Certainly we've also seen things like individual stories, like Caleb, like Joshua. We're probably the only church that knows Caleb's father's name. But I guess he wasn't as bad as Joshua, at least he did have a dad. But we're seeing those individual stories and how important leadership is. Lots of things happening at the individual level, and of course we're seeing that ultimately no one deserves or can work the way into a relationship with God. And the only hope that anybody has is to receive God's gift of a relationship. We're seeing that at the individual level, but we're also seeing something that you might not be used to looking out for. It's the big plan of God, and He's working at another level. He's working at a national level. You see, He's chosen this group of people. Going back to Abraham, He picked them out. He brought them into being. I was down in Bonn 2 weeks ago, preaching there, so they say hello. And and I was preaching in Exodus 3 there, where we see God speaking to Moses about these very people and saying, these are my people down in Egypt in slavery. And I remember my covenant I made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This people as a nation have a specific relationship with God and a special role in it. And so God has got a national program going on. He's promised to Abraham He's going to take and He's going to bring these people into a land because He's going to bless them, and then in His national program use them to be a blessing to all the world. And so it's a worldwide program. And this blessing, of course, can be understood against many of the promises that He's led up to this point. He's going to undo the curse of the law of sin. He's going to bring rest to mankind. He's going to bring victory to man, undeserving man. He's going to bless them. So He's going to do it through this nation, Israel. As you read on through the story, we're going to see that there's a ruler will arise out of this nation. He's going to take on the throne of Jerusalem, and He's going to bring an end to the evil rule, nations worldwide. He's going to bring peace. So we're following, not just on the learning lessons at the individual level, but also seeing God's plan work out at a national level. See, we're not necessarily very used to looking at that. I was wondering, how can I best maybe illustrate that? And I was thinking, as a football player, that might provide a good illustration. I follow, for my sins, I follow Manchester United. And you know where this is going. But I follow this team that has in the past been very successful. The team enters into the league. The team wins the silverware. And of course, I might be interested in the individual stories of the players as they come up into the team and then get transferred out of the team. But I can follow their stories, but I'm also interested in the team, in the club. And in that case, it's the club that's going to win the silverware, and the bigger plan there, or in Manchester United's case, not win silverware again and again and again. But you can see we can follow the individual lives of the Israelites as they're offered this chance to put a faith in God. But we can also see at that, let's say, the team level, the club level, the national level, God has a plan working out. And I think if you can also look at that, you get a bigger picture of Scripture on its unity and its progression, and we can look forward to the culmination of that plan as He does bring peace to the earth, as He does provide for this nation and then bless this nation so it will be a blessing to all the nations. Anyway, that's the national program, and unfortunately, as we said, chapter 14, it's come to a halt. It's ground to a halt as these people refuse to go into the land. And what begins then is 38 years of this holding pattern. And you might have been in an airplane where you notice that the airplane is going round and round and round. Of course, what they don't tell you is it's using up its fuel before it takes a risky landing. But this is what's happening. These guys are just going around and around for 38, 39 years. And the story will pick up again in chapter 20 with the next generation. But here we have this time now of them wandering around. And as they're wandering, I'm sure they're also wondering, W-O. They might be thinking about the terrible events of the previous chapter, in chapter 14, as they get this consequences of their decision, this really sad impact of what they've just chosen, and the consequences of their refusal to obey God and their despising of Him. And I think, this is pure speculation here, but you get almost to see the 5 stages of grief in the previous chapter: denial, bargaining, anger, discouragement or depression, and then acceptance, as they try and charge into the land and take it anyway. But surely the reality is set in, and they're now facing 38 years of just wandering around. And I think I calculated, if there's 600,000 men, 38 years or 40 years, they're burying about 10 men a day until that whole generation goes. And I say they must be wondering whether God really has abandoned them totally, and whether He really does care, if there is a chance for them in any way to find mercy from Him. And I think it's in that, thankfully, we can say that the book of Numbers does not end in chapter 14 with this very depressing situation. It continues on into chapter 15. And I could sum up this chapter, and I want to go through it after we read it here, as God provides sacrifices so these rebels can be His royal people. God provides sacrifices so that these rebels, or that He provides the law, so these rebels could be His royal people. So let's stand up. I'm going to read some of the parts of it, and then we'll unpack that a little bit. If you haven't by now, it's in Numbers 15. You can turn there with me. I think it's on the screen as well. All right, let's turn just to verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land you are to inhabit, which I am giving you, and you offer to the Lord from the herd or from the flock a food offering or a burnt offering or a sacrifice, to fulfill a vow or as a freewill offering, or at your appointed feasts to make a pleasing aroma to the Lord, then he who brings his offering shall offer to the Lord a grain offering of 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour, mixed with 1/4 of hin of oil. And you shall offer with the burnt offering, or with the sacrifice, 1/4 of a hin of wine for the drink offering for each lamb. Now it goes on, what are you going to do for a ram? What are you going to do for a bull? So you can skip down to verse 11. Thus it shall be done for each bull or ram, or for each lamb or young goat, for as many as you offer. So shall you do with each one, as many as are there. Every native Israelite shall do these things in this way, in offering a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord. And if a stranger is sojourning with you, or anyone is living permanently among you, and he wishes to offer a food offering with a pleasing aroma to the Lord, he shall do as you do. If you just skip on ahead a little bit to verse 22. But if you sin unintentionally and do not observe all these commands that the Lord has spoken to Moses, all that the Lord has commanded you by Moses from the day that the Lord gave the commandment and onward throughout your generations, then, if it has been done unintentionally without the knowledge of the congregation, all the congregation should offer one bull from the herd for a burnt offering, a pleasing aroma to the Lord, with its grain offering and its drink offering, according to the rule, and one goat for a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for all the congregation of the people of Israel. And they shall be forgiven because it was a mistake. And they have brought their offering, a food offering to the Lord, and their sin offering before the Lord for their mistake. And all the congregation of the people of Israel shall be forgiven, and the stranger who sojourns among them, because the whole population was involved in the mistake. You can take a seat. This might be one of those chapters you just jump over, but as we work through the Bible and as we're moving through these books, it kind of forces it into them. It forces us into these chapters. But I think it does, especially in light of the context, present this very encouraging story that God is providing these sacrifices or these offerings for his people, for these rebels, so that they may be his royal and live out as his royal people, so that rebels could be royalty. I want to move just through those 3 points. God provides sacrifices, royalty, and rebels. As we said, we just read from a little bit at the beginning of the chapter and a little bit at the end of the chapter, and we looked at this idea of sacrifices first. Sacrifice. It's probably not something that you use, a word that you use outside of a church context. Certainly, maybe for most of us, feels a bit strange, bringing animals and killing them, and blood running out, maybe even a little gruesome. But ultimately, you see sacrifices through the Bible. You see sacrifices elsewhere in many other religions. I think you even see it in a lesser level across life. It's an effort to bring something valuable, to restore a broken relationship. And you do see it. You see it right there at the very beginning of the Bible, when that relationship was broken between God and man. You see Adam and Eve, who were given this wonderful opportunity to reign as God's rulers over this world and experience God's wonderful provision. You see them decide, no, we will not do that, and in the end bear the consequences of the relationship breaking between God and them, and God kicking them out of the garden. And Genesis 3 ends with them being driven out of God's presence, out into, well, they continue to live, but just like a ship with a irreparable breach in its hull, it's going down. And so man has been separated from God, separated from the source of life, driven out of the garden, and the way is barred after him. The next chapter starts with sacrifices. Men coming, and we don't know when this was advised to them or told, but clearly this is an opportunity to come and offer something to try and restore a broken relationship. Now, if I was to give you 30-second overview of the book of Leviticus, what's specific and what helps us to understand what these sacrifices are about is this blood element. And you can read through by all means, go back and read through the book of Leviticus. Follow the blood. Why the focus on blood? Certainly we've been singing about how blood cleanses. I went to an all-boys school and we had to wear white shirts. And with all the scuffles in the corridor, I can definitely assure you that blood leaves a mess. I've ruined many white shirts. How does blood clean? Well, the idea is that the blood is the life. The blood is the life. And what's happening is God's offering an opportunity for them to come, to restore a broken relationship by offering a life for a life. It's a substitution. A life for a life. God has offered the chance for people to come back to him, bringing the life of a substitute, so they may experience a restoration of this broken relationship, at least for a while. Maybe not a very familiar concept if you haven't spent time in the Old Testament or in the Bible, but it's something I think that is very, very foundational. And so here we have God providing for them sacrifices, bloody sacrifices, opportunity for them to draw near with a substitute. And you had, the reason why I read a little bit from the beginning and the end of the chapter, you have two different kind of categories of offerings, of sacrifices here. You have at the beginning of the chapter voluntary ones, and at the end of the chapter you have like necessary ones that have to be offered on the occasion of sin. We went through the book of Leviticus not too long ago, and it tells us more detail here, but basically just to talk briefly about the voluntary ones, you have what's mentioned here, a burnt offering where everything, this animal is come. It's all burnt up as an act of devotion, an act of loyalty to one sovereign. The grain offering, another voluntary offering, was you bringing a gift of grain, a gift, a tribute, like what you would do to a ruler. And you have also a peace offering in here as well, where somebody can go and actually experience and celebrate a peace that one has, and dine with God, eat the offering there in the presence of God. And this, as I say, this is an opportunity through this, bringing this animal, you get to offer an act of devotion, loyalty to your sovereign. Now I follow some woodworkers on YouTube, because I have a very interesting life. I follow these woodworkers on YouTube, and they build this stuff, and occasionally they'll build something really nice for a famous person. Now I think they're probably doing it to boost their channel's clicks, but I think also when you see, for example, one woodworker, is a tongue twister. One woodworker builds this guitar for a famous person, and the attention and the detail he puts in and the costly materials he does as he builds this guitar, and then he goes and he takes it and with total nervousness hands it over to this person with the hope that this famous person will like it. Just shows you that we do this. We like bringing something valuable to one we esteem highly or one we idolize. Well, here Israel gets an opportunity to bring offerings, costly offerings to God. The other offering, as I said, those were the voluntary ones. The ones at the end of the chapter are the ones that are on the occasion of sin. And you'll see here the repeated phrase through that section from verse 22 onwards is this thing of, they shall be forgiven. The first half, bringing something that offers loyalty, devotion to God. The repeated phrase there was a pleasing aroma. But here we see this is an offering on the occasion of sin. If somebody has committed a sin, incurred guilt, then they could bring this sin offering, and it would be they would be purified. There would be a covering, albeit temporary. There would be a covering for them, and it says that they shall be forgiven. So here's the two sacrifices that God has provided. God provides sacrifices. There's our first point. The second one is royalty. God provides sacrifices so rebels could be royalty. Royalty, where do we see that? Look down with me to verse 37, and then we'll read just to the end of the chapter briefly. You can keep your seats. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel and tell them to make tassels on the corner of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassel of each corner. And it should be a tassel for you to look at and remember all the commandments of the Lord to do them, not to follow after your own heart and your own eyes, which you are inclined to whore after. So you shall remember to do all my commandments and be holy to the Lord. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God." Here is, so he's talking about this additional command to go and make these tassels and put it on the end of their garments. These kind of long, fabric-y things. Technical term. So referring back to the commands, these were like visual reminders to obey all the law. Part of that is obviously the sacrifices, but there was many other aspects to it too. These these visual reminders was to point them back to the law. And I think the key element here is the color. It says, put them a cord of blue. Now, color for us is no problem, but blue dye was extremely expensive then. Blue dye is a special thing. And if you can remember, for those of us who can, pointing back to Exodus, where have we seen blue show up? It's in the building of the tabernacle and the veil. The blue points back to royalty, points back to King God there enthroned in their midst. And so as they were to go about their life, these tassels were visual reminders to look back and remember who they were. They were God's people. Whose they were even. They were there for his royal people. And to remember to do the law, to live out the law so that they would experience it. Now I think the law gets a bad rap, right? We're used to reading stories about how Jesus is fighting with the Pharisees or Paul with the Judaizers and how salvation is by faith and not by works of the law. And we end up thinking, therefore, the law is bad or is wrong. And actually, it's right. It's good. It's just not enough, but it's good. See, if these people, pointing them with these little tassels back to this law, God's law, they'd be reminded to live out as God's people and experience life as his royal people. If I could take you to two passages, I think they'll show up on the screen. First of all, Exodus 19. Exodus 19 and verse 5 just shows us the rule. This points us back ultimately to the program, this national program, and the role that law plays. Verse 5. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, there's your law, you shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So if they would live out, follow the law, God says they will experience life as his treasured possession. They will be his kingdom of priests. They will have a mediatorial role to all the other nations. That points us back to this role that Abraham has given them, that God has given them through Abraham. To be blessed, to be a blessing to all the world. I think the other passage I want to take you to, we haven't got to it yet. We haven't got to Deuteronomy, but if you turn to Deuteronomy 4 in verse 6, he's just talked about the commandments, the statutes, the rules. In verse 6 he says, keep them and do them. For that you will be your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of all the peoples. There's that public witness. Who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has a God so near to them as the Lord your God is to us, wherever we call upon him? Here's just two passages that just remind them of who they are. They're God's people, and they will experience God's people if they follow God's law. It just shows that the law is not a bad thing, not an evil thing, but it turns out to be an insufficient thing because, like this verse here back in Numbers 15, with this visual reminder kind of indicates they have a tendency to forget. They have an inability to actually follow that law. But here we go. It ultimately shows that the greatest gift that this nation has is the opportunity to be God's royal people, to experience him, and then to lead others by their witness to God to experience him. Sacrifices, God has provided it so they will be his royal people. Let's remember who he's speaking to. He's speaking to rebels. There's my third point. He's speaking to these rebels, and against the backdrop of chapter 13 and 14, these are the people who've decided that, no, God, we would rather have slavery to Pharaoh. We would rather go back there than trust you. We'd rather have the cucumbers. And so this is a group of people who are right now under the consequences of that decision, feeling the bite, that bitter pill of now never experiencing life with God in the land, the role that he has for this nation. You can imagine the fears as they wander and wondering what God sees with them, or if they truly have any hope. And so against that backdrop, this, what might be a rather boring chapter if looked at it from human terms, really takes life, I think. Because you see, in this desperation, this depression, this worry, God speaks to them. God continues to speak to them. He continues to guide them. He gives them a reminder of his law. And in doing so, he reminds them of his presence and his program for them as a nation. And as you might have picked up, he also reminds them that they really will, as a nation, get into the land, and the program will go on. Just verse 1 of chapter 15 in Numbers, verse 2, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land you are to inhabit, which I am giving you. And we get a reminder, you will come into the land. I am giving it to you. Verse 17 is the same. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land to which I bring you, when you eat of the bread of the land, you shall present a contribution. So there's multiple times in this chapter he just encourages them, reminds them. He brings them hope for the future. And this is just an insight into the person of God. That truly God is the one that's seeking to restore the broken relationship. He's the one providing these sacrifices, drawing them in and providing for them so they can experience life with him. Grace is the most greatest gift that this gracious God can give is himself. And I think the saddest stories down through the Bible are the ones where people come to a realization too late, usually, that the consequences of their sin are that they're missing out on God, missing out on the life that God had for them. You think of Adam and Eve as they are drove out of the garden to bear forever the effects of their sin. We think of Cain, banished to wander. We think of Esau with his bowl of stew and how he's made that decision to go for his hunger and meet his appetites then and there, than to consider what God's plan was for him. He could have been the line that's being looked after. He could have been God's team. Instead, he went for what was immediately appealing. We think of Saul at the end of his reign, grabbing at Samuel's robe because he suddenly realizes what has happened. His disobedience has resulted in God removing from him the kingdom through which the Messiah is going to come, and the eternal ruler. And Saul realizes too late his choices and where they've led. I think in this chapter also we skipped over it, so I want to read it now. You also get a warning. What is the alternative? What is the alternative? It's God or it's death. Let me read from verse 30 just through to 36. This will more or less be the rest. I'll be finished now with looking at the chapter. Verse 30. But the person who does anything with a high hand, whether he is a native or a sojourner, reviles the Lord. And that person shall be cut off from among his people, because he has despised the word of the Lord and has broken his commandment. That person shall be utterly cut off. His iniquity shall be on him. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath. And those who found him gathered in sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it had not been made clear what should be done with him. And the Lord said to Moses, the man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. And all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, as the Lord commanded. Very sobering little story put in here. In fact, some of my atheistic friends have a hard time with this and give me a hard time over this story. But it's in the context. Basically what we have here is an illustration of verse 30. Verse 30 is, but anyone who does anything with a high hand, there will not be a sacrifice for this person. That's a contrast. Basically the context there is there's this provision of sacrifices to cover sin, so there could be forgiveness of sin. But he said, but there will be no sacrifice for the person that does something with a high hand. That is someone who does something deliberately and persistently against God. Someone who is defiant. Someone who ultimately does not want God. That person, there is no provision for their sin. And so it's a warning. There's forgiveness for the humble, the repentant, but there's not for the defiant. And in this little story, we don't know when it happened, of this guy gathering sticks, is an illustration of that. You might say it's pretty hard, right? Gathering sticks, the guy got death. Is that like a parent being overly strict and harsh with his children? But I think this person who's gathering sticks in the Sabbath is the person who has persistently and deliberately defied God and his rules. And we know when you do wrong, the seriousness of it is directly linked to the value or the status of the person you've wronged. So if you kick your dog, there might be a small consequence, not a very good thing. If you kick your wife, don't do it. There's a few more consequences, right? And if you kick a policeman, there's going to be some more consequences again. This person, it's serious not because of the sticks, but it's serious because they have deliberately and persistently defied God. And the law says death for that person. And in so doing, it is warning us, it's warning them that there is no provision for the person who is insubordinate or defies God. And you might even think, maybe he wasn't openly aggressive to God. He was indifferent. Even that, indifferent to God, there is no hope for that person. Well, on that more sobering note, I think we can just sum up and come on to sort of the response or application. God is providing sacrifices for this rebellious people to turn and experience life as his royal people. And he's done this in this kind of limited fashion through the law. He's given this opportunity for these guys who are wandering through the desert, and then when they come into the land to experience that. It is limited, is a good provision, but it's limited. We know the greater story, though, is he has the plans to intend to provide a complete provision, a permanent provision. That through Jesus Christ, there can be a proper doing away of sin and an experience to a greater extent of being God's people and experiencing God. Jesus, of course, is the substitute as he goes and be the sacrifice for our sins. He is the one who truly is a life for a life. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says that he became sin who knew no sin. He became sin. He was identified with sin. Whose sin? Ours. So we might become the righteousness of God. There's the great exchange. There is the true life for life. When he went to the cross, he brought with him all the record of our guilt and debt, and it was settled. He is the one. Now we could go into that, but what I wanted to look at, just as it fits with our theme here in Numbers 15, is that it's God. He is God's sacrifice. Yes, Jesus went. We just went through the book of Mark and seen the servant and his humble love for the people and him going to be the ransom for them. But that's true. Jesus embraces the plan, but it's God's plan. Very famous verse in John 3:16. He gave his son so that we would not be condemned. He did not send his son into the world, verse 17 I meant to say. He didn't send his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. God sent. It's true that Jesus went, but this is the heart of the Father to provide the sacrifice. What, just so that we can avoid the consequences of sin? No. So that we would avoid the consequence of sin and have the relationship. He did it, as 1 Peter 3:18 says. He did it to bring us to God. God is the one that seeks to restore the broken relationship. He's the one that's providing the sacrifice in a limited way for this nation to play its part as we see them here in the wilderness, and then to provide for them and all nations this ultimate. And so I want to end with just two applications. Don't miss out on the provision of God. There is one way. It's Jesus Christ. It's easy for us to look at Israel in this story and say, fools, why don't you just trust? Look what you're missing out on. And then to neglect the fact that the same God calls us today and has provided. Don't miss out. But I think also for those of us who have been brought in, who have that relationship, who have been adopted as children, who abide now in the vine, Jesus is our provision too. He provides obviously the basis for the relationship so that we may have that relationship and the potential to experience God even now. But then he's our provision, and then that he's our guide, our leader, our shepherd, so that we may experience God, we may follow him. And as Colossians 2:16 says, this is Paul arguing, encouraging the church there. He says, as you've received Christ, now walk in him. Walk in him. It's a provision of Jesus Christ so that through following him, we might experience God. Of course, we can learn from this law, this temporary, provisional, limited covenant. They had costly sacrifices. They had to be careful. They had to be humble. Paul calls the church into living sacrifices. James reminds the church that don't be hasty and forget that God is the one in control. You don't just go here and there and buy and sell without God being in control. Be careful. And Paul says, be thankful. You have to be careful to truly experience God. Costly sacrifices. And it's also a humble walk. As John encourages those to who he's writing, he says, don't try and hide your sin. Confess your sin. And he is faithful and just to forgive it. This is the walk. This is to follow Jesus. This is to be his disciples. And that's something that's a call on every Christian in this room and a call on us also as a whole body. We're called into obedience so that we may experience God and that others through us might experience God. And I know that we've been talking about it quite a few times over this last few weeks. The cost financially is becoming more and more clear what it's going to look like to be the church here, to follow Jesus here. Of course, it's going to cost us more than we took in last year. It's going to eat up into our savings. But it's going to cost us more than financial. It's going to cost your involvement, your time. It's going to cost your care. It's going to cost us to love and pair with one another. It's going to cost us to send people out to go to Aachen or to go to IGK. Keep losing members to IGK. It's going to cost us. But you know what? As nervous as this may make me a little bit, it does a little bit at least, I'm also kind of impatient. I'm eager to see what we might learn about God through it. What God is going to go through us and in us as he lets us experience the greatest thing about life, which is communion with God. Because whatever he calls us to follow, he calls us so we may experience him. So as we look at this, just leave this chapter of laws that don't directly relate to us. And look at it as we gather this week. Consider the call, the provision of a sacrifice in Jesus Christ to provide for us everything we need to have fellowship with God. And then the provision of Jesus Christ as our leader, as our guide, that we may follow him in living sacrifices. So would you just pray with me? And we'll close. Lord, we thank you for the great privilege of being called your children, knowing that our names are written, our future is secured, that we will experience what you are preparing as you move this plan along your program. Lord, we thank you that you've opened it up to people of all nations. You have a care, Lord, and a grace for these guys and this story and this nation, but you are abounding in steadfast love. And you've decided to call a people who are not your own, your people, and we thank you. We thank you, Lord, that right now in Cologne we are also experiencing you at work, that you have not forgotten this city. You've not forgotten us, Lord. You've come into our lives when we were unworthy. And you have brought us to life with you and brought us even into usefulness, Lord, as you do the most important thing that's happening right now. You are continuing to advance your program. Lord, I pray that as you lead us forward in individual situations, and Lord, as a whole body, as a church, Lord, we want to experience you in it. We want to have that awareness, to have our eyes fixed on you and not, we're so easily distracted, Lord. We want to be walking by the Spirit, be reminded of your provision. We want these stories to stay with us, to inspire us, and encourage us that you are the same God right there, the God of the Red Sea, God of that had with a mighty hand brought his people out of Egypt. And you can bring us forward, Lord, to advance whatever it is you are doing in this city. We pray, Lord, with Lucas, Lord, that you would be gracious to this city, be gracious to our workplaces, our schools. Turn this place into a place that brings you praise, experiences you, knows the prosperity, the true riches, Lord, of that. So we may reflect how good you are, how gracious you are to others. I pray for the life groups as they meet this week. I pray that you would grant us great fellowship as we talk through these big themes. In Jesus' name, amen.